So without further ado, we are on page 55, and we are in lesson 3 of Jewish mysticism lessons in Tanya, with the goal of doing this on a practical level, of bettering our character, getting to know ourselves, our souls, and the forces that drive us. Like that, we can learn to harness them or control them and be better people. Better spouses, better friends, better partners, better people. So we are on page 55 of the Practical Tanya. And we have handout number 3 in front of us. And chapter 3 is titled Your Three Brains. And so in last week's lesson, we introduced the godly soul. The second soul, right, it starts off very good. The nefesh hashinit, the second soul. We discussed why that is. It's because naturally, what powers us naturally is the animal soul. And the...
Sorry, I couldn't
no problem,
hear well.
that's fine. What powers us naturally is the animal soul. Our natural life comes from the animal soul. That's also why the animal soul is a little bit more on the selfish side, right? It's about us. It's all about us. Now, does that mean that we are naturally evil? We're naturally bad? No. Right? And we elaborated upon that in previous lessons. And then in last week's, so in the first class we introduced the animal soul. In the second class we introduced the godly soul. And we explained that the godly soul is a whole process, how it came down. We discussed the origin of the godly soul. But we also discussed that the soul is comprised of 5 levels, right? 5 elements, so to speak. I think we talked briefly, even though it was off topic, about the fact that 3 of them reside within our body, 2 of them are still up in heaven, but are connected to our body. And sometimes when we see something, or more importantly, when we feel something, it's because our soul sees something. We talk about souls seeing things, right? So sometimes someone says, I woke up today and I was inspired, or I feel like a better person, I feel like I want to be better. Sometimes that's because other elements of our soul, other aspects of our soul that are not within our body are affecting us from above. Okay, so today we want to try to analyze the soul on a little bit more of a nitty-gritty level, or on a, let's dissect it a little bit. So every soul is made up of 10 attributes. Okay, now before we get to the 10 attributes, so again, what is a soul? A soul is a piece of God, right? So if we're going to try to understand the soul, we have to understand God, right? That's the only way we're going to get there. So we start off, the Alter Rebbe starts off chapter 3 by talking a little bit about God, right? I mean, he starts off with the soul, right? He says that every element, every portion of the soul that's within us, meaning those 3 levels that are within us, are comprised of 10 powers, 10 attributes. And they are based off the 10 attributes with which we view God. Now, what does this mean? What does it mean that God has 10 attributes? Okay, so what does it mean anytime? Anytime we give anything else, any other description to God. Right? Let's analyze that for a second. We know that God has different names, right? Yud Kei Vav Kei, right? Otherwise known as Havaya, Elokim, Kel, Shakai, right? I'm not pronouncing them properly because we don't say God's name for no reason. But, all these lots of different things. What are there? Many different gods? Chas v'shalom, heaven forbid. Right? So what are all these different names of God? Go ahead.
Elohim is plural.
Elohim would be plural. First of all, by the way, that's another good question, right? Are there more than one God? Also not, right? Okay, we're going to get to that. But even besides for that, the very fact that there's other names, right? Other names usually implies that there's multiple people in the room, right? If I tell you, you walk into this room and Danny's here and Ashley's here and Margarita's here and Zushi's here and Jordan's here, there's multiple people here. So what are these multiple names for God, right? And so really as part of the same answer to the same question, the Tzemach Tzedek talks about this at length, actually. Obviously based off the Tanya and based off of where we're studying about it here, but he talks about how there's lots of different things you could say, right? You talk about not, let's say, necessarily biblical sources. Well, yes, specifically biblical sources, but not necessarily biblical, holy people, right? The Egyptians spoke about God and they said, we saw a finger of God, or a hand of God, or, right? Or even we praise God and we say that God took us out of Egypt with an outstretched arm. So what are these things referring to? So obviously the obvious answer is that even we as people can sometimes have multiple names, right? And those multiple names are used to refer to multiple ways of our interacting with other people, right? So I am free to call the young man at the end of the table here, Arnold, right? He's a friend of mine, and we know each other. I can call him Arnold. But if I walk into his practice and I'm a patient, it's doctor, right? And if there's lots of different titles, so to speak, that we give to other people. And so similarly here with God, it is the same way. So the names of God, as a rule, I mean, there's different. Each name would have to be analyzed, and the context of that situation would have to be analyzed. We would have to understand it properly. But as a general rule, if the name Elokim is being used, that's because a particular attribute is being exercised. In the context of Elokim, it is Midat Hadin, or the judge, the way that God judges the world, or sort of the left side, right? The stringent side, the more
authoritative.
Or the word that he uses in this translation is restraint. Gevurah, he translates, even though Gevurah technically is strength, right, which is also attributed with that same aspect, or the left side, but he uses the word restraint. For chesed, he uses the word giving, and the reason for that is because I'll open a parenthesis here just for a moment, parenthetically. Why does he not want to use the word chesed? Anybody? What's the proper translation of the word chesed in Hebrew? Anybody?
Love. Loving kindness.
Kindness, love, loving kindness, right? Very what?
Mercy.
Mercy. Mercy is rachamim, right? I think. You know Hebrew. You should help me out. Chesed is more kindness or loving kindness. Love is ahava. So it's, again, all these words interchange. Even in English, by the way, we interchange these words all the time. But it's important to differentiate them for what they are. Now, that being said, right, so chesed is not necessarily always love or kindness. What does that mean? Okay, so like I said, we're opening up a parenthesis here because it's not really the discussion we want to have here. Really here we're talking about all of the 10 attributes, and we're going to talk about each one as an individual. But when there's the discussion about the attributes interlinking or interconnecting, intermingling is a good word, right? So one of the famous examples brought up is when a father takes away a knife from a child, right? And the child is crying, bloody murder. I'm offended, right? Not even everybody, as a mother is here in the room, will know the difference between a cry of a child when the child is hurt, for instance, right? Or the cry of a child when the child is offended. Right? And offensive is like, it's a whole nother cry, and it touches you much, much deeper. It's like, my child is offended at me, right? And sometimes when you take away a knife from a child, the child cries out, it's offended. The baby is offended. How dare you take away? I was playing with this item, right? And it seems to an onlooker, right, as if this is the most, right now. The reason for that is because there's a level of restraint here, right? There's definitely something of restraint or stringency happening in this case, but it is really gevurah shebechesed, right? Or chesed shebegevurah, depending on the scenario.
Boundaries.
Again?
Putting boundaries.
It's putting boundaries, but particularly putting boundaries could be a negative thing, right? If you tell your child you can't leave the house, if you tell your child you can't leave the house, not because you're trying to discipline the child, but just because, right? Heaven forbid, where we've all heard stories of abusive parents, right? That's also putting boundaries. But there's chesed shebegevurah, and then there's gevurah shebegevurah, right? Which means there is, we'll use the literal translation, right? There is kindness that there is within strength, and then there is strength that there is within strength. Strength for the sake of strength, right? Now, okay, so let's end the parentheses here because we were talking about the intermingling of the attributes, right? But that's why it's not so simple just to use the word kindness or strength or something like that. For the most part, when we say chesed, what we are referring to is the giving part of God, not such a kind part of God, because it's also hard to put the word kind on God, right? It's an emotional thing. Kind is an emotional thing, right? We're talking here much more about an attribute, a way that God affects the world. And is God kind or stringent? God is neither. But God is both, right? What does that mean? That there are different ways that God interacts with the world, based on the way the world interacts with God, based on God's master plan, based on things that only the infinite one knows, right? God in his infinite wisdom knows, right? Now, that being said, so not always is chesed kindness. Chesed is better translated as giving, right? The giving side of God. And that's, I think, why he uses the word giving. Gevurah is the opposite of chesed, right? So gevurah is restraint, the opposite of chesed. Tiferet, which in Hebrew I think means beauty, right? Literal Hebrew, I think, would be probably the best word. The word that he uses here to translate is harmony. Why? Because Tiferet is best translated as a combination, or the ultimate combination, right? Because chesed and gevurah, like we just discussed, can be combined in many different ways, right? But the ultimate combination of Chesed and Gevurah together is Tiferet. Okay, and so on. We have Netzach, Hod, Yesod, etc. Now, so there are 10 of these attributes in total. The first 3 of them are what we call the mothers. Okay, now, let's remember that right now we've been talking all on a godly level, right? Everybody's with me? We're talking right now on a God level. God's way of interacting with the world in a way of giving. In a way of chachma, which is going to be inquiry and cognition, recognition. Right? We're not going to get into each one of them in detail. However, there are 10 different ways that God interacts with the world. 3 of them fall into the first category, which is, we'll call them for now, we'll call them mothers. Okay? The following 7, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchut, so let's just list them very briefly. The first 3, the mothers, are Chachma, Bina, Dat, what we are translating now as inquiry, cognition, or recognition. By the way, if you want to follow me inside the book, on page 57, or page 56 on the last line, you can see Pirosh Chachma Bina Vadat. This means Chachma, inquiry, Bina, cognition, and Dat, recognition. The first 3 of the 10 Sefirot, or attributes of God, right, correspond to the mothers, the internal mind of God. We're going to get to why that in a moment. And then you have the rest of the 7 of them, which are the rest of the attributes: Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, kindness or giving, right, restraint, harmony, etc. So after that goes Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and then the final one is Malchut. Okay? Now, you might recognize the first 3 as being an acronym for, anybody?
Chabad.
Very good. So it's on the paper, but also you might have heard of this before. Chachma Bina Dat. We'll open up a parenthesis just for curiosity's sake, because I'm sure many of you are curious. The reason why Chabad is called Chabad is because after the Baal Shem Tov, there was a splitting of the ways, very peaceful splitting of the ways. There definitely was friction and conflict during the time of the Baal Shem Tov, during the Alter Rebbe, against Chassidus. But in terms of this splitting of the ways, this was a very peaceful splitting of the ways. There were 2 of the disciples of the Baal Shem Tov. Possibly was the Mr. Chamagid. My history might be a little bit off, but definitely right around then, right after the founding of Chassidus, that believed in 2 different paths of serving God. The Alter Rebbe, who founded Chassidus Chabad, through the authorship of the Tanya, right, or as part of that was the authorship of the Tanya, he believed very strongly that everything starts in Chabad. Everything has to start in our minds. Chabad being the intellectual properties, right? And there were other schools of thought, which by the way, till today, some of them exist. You may have heard of other sects of Hasidim, Bells, Satmar, etc. Many of them fall under the category of Chagas Chassid, which means it's much more about the emotions than it is about the intellect. It's much more about how we feel than how we understand or meditate or contemplate God. Okay. So that's end parentheses. Now, but back to what we were saying. So till now, the discussion has been godly, right? So God has 10 different attributes with which God interacts with the world. 3 of them are the mothers, 7 of them are the children. So far, it sounds very cryptic, very Kabbalistic, right? But these 10 attributes, we're in bullet point number 4, are reflected in the 10 attributes of the Jewish soul, right? So we said at the beginning of today's class, as we were reiterating from last week's class, right, that the second soul, the nefesh halokiyah, the godly soul of the human being, is chelek elokam imal mamash, a portion of God, literally. So that portion of God, which is within the human being, right, has within it God, the godly attributes, the concept of God, right? Now, but because the soul has gone through many different stages of development, again, as we discussed last week, right, it traversed the 4 different worlds, right, and came down here into this physical world. And now it's actually enclosed within a body. So on the way, those 10 different attributes, while in God are reflected in certain, maybe much more unlimited or infinite ways, come down in a very finite fashion. And by us, the first 3, or what we call the mothers, are our intellect, and the final 7 are our emotions. Okay? And this is the point that we're getting to, right? So if you weren't with me till now, that's okay. I know we went very lofty over here with godly attributes and the way that God interacts with the world, etc. And we even opened up 2 parentheses, but now you should be with me definitely now, because this is the most important point that I was trying to make, that the soul, the neshama of a Jew, is comprised of 10 different attributes. What does that mean? 10 different powers or energies, right? Within a Jew. we can use the word characteristics. You'll also see that none of these words are good enough, and that's why we get down to grouping them, etc., because then we get a better idea. In us, they are reflected that when we live life, this is actually practical. This is actually us. This is the way we go about our lives. We go about our lives with the 3 intellectual attributes and with the 7 emotional attributes. How does that work? Right? So before we get to how that works, each part of our soul, right? So I actually made a mistake in the handout, and I should mention that. It says each of the 5 elements. It's really each of the 3 elements of the soul that are within us contain these 10 attributes within them. Okay, so what's going on here? What is going on over here? So we have 3 intellectual attributes and 7 emotional attributes, right? And now we reach section 2. Where do feelings come from? So when we go about our lives, right, and so I'll state it on a simple level, then we'll analyze it, right? We go about our lives, feeling, thinking, doing all the time, right? Our process is as follows. Ladies and gentlemen, our process is as follows. Something starts in our minds, it starts with a seed, a kernel of an idea. It fleshes out into something that begins to, let's say, obsess us, right? Then there's that moment where it traverses, it merges from being a thought, an intellectual idea, to being an emotion. Okay, and we're going to talk a lot today about that level. The connection between intellect and emotion, how actually there's certain ages and stages of the human being where we can see that are lacking or have too much of that connection. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But there's the connection between the intellect and the emotion. Then as it comes down to the emotion, it expresses itself in lots of different emotions, depending on how things were in the brain. That's the way they were in the that's the type of emotion that they will give birth to, right? You'll slowly, I'll try to use as many words as possible, and then slowly we'll or analogies as possible, then we'll get to a place where we'll start to understand these concepts, what has been giving birth, right? So depending on what one thinks about, that's the type of emotion that's born out of it, right? So let's talk about something very, very simple, okay? Because we'll try to avoid these heavy emotions, right? Loving a person so deeply, whatever. Let's try it. It's a very simple level, right? A person can have a good feeling towards a certain physical object, right? A Tesla, Ferrari, whatever, right? A person can have a desire for a Tesla or a Ferrari. Where's that born from? A person doesn't just wake up one day and say, I saw this word Ferrari in the newspaper, I want one. At the very least, there has to be at least a little bit of knowledge, intellect about the Ferrari, right? He understands that it's a very expensive car, right? Some people, that's enough for them. It's the most expensive car in the world, I want it, right? Other people need to understand, no, it's not just expensive, it's fast. Drives fast. Not just drives fast, it looks gorgeous, right? Not just it looks gorgeous, but it's durable, it's whatever, etc., 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 right? All the different adjectives that all the marketing companies use at us and throw at us on a daily basis, right? It's with iPads. It's thinner, it's lighter, it's faster, it's all of them, right? Now, the more, and why are they trying to do this? Why do these marketing companies have it out to teach us about their products? Just have us develop an emotion for it, have us develop a desire for it, go directly for the emotion. That's what they want, right? People make their decisions a lot of times based on emotions, especially some of the more irrational decisions, right? It's based on their emotions. Why don't they just market directly to our emotions? Because that's impossible. A human being, everything begins in his mind. From his mind gives birth to an emotion. Okay? Let's skip all of the in-between levels for now. Let's talk about God. So when it comes to God as well, we can have lots of different emotions about God, right? We can have an intense love for God. That's one of the things we're looking for when we study Tanya, right? To have a love for God. That makes us better people, etc., right? That's the end of our journey. But we can have awe of God. Oh my gosh, God is so great. Right? We can have fear of God. We can have lots of different ways of interacting with God, right? What decides what type of emotion I feel about God today, right? Is only, let's say I love God today. Is that because that's the only thing that's true? I only love God. I don't fear God. I don't have an awe of God. No. Today I feel a love of God. What decides that? What goes on in our mind? Okay? And that is the process that anything within the soul follows. Things start, right? The 3 intellectual attributes give birth to the 7 emotional attributes, right? And now that we want to run through it on a brief overview, let's analyze it a little bit more. And we're going to pause at that connection stage that we spoke about, the jumping from, or the transition from intellect to emotion, because that's something that Alter Rebbe wants to teach us about, because that can be valuable to us. Okay? But let's start a little higher up than that. The first level of the 10 attributes is called Chachma. Chachma in Plain English is wisdom. The word he uses here is inquiry. Okay, but let me talk a little bit about Chachma. You'll soon get a proper understanding, or you'll have a relative experience to compare it to. Chachma is that idea, that seed of an idea, the inception of an idea, the flash. Look at somebody and he has Chachma. You ask him, what do you mean by that? Right? A brilliant scientist. He says something, and then you're like, what do you mean by that? And he can't yet explain what he means by that. Well, I mean, there's a good chance that he's already saying it, then that's already past lots of stages, right? But before he can even say anything, right? He has this burst of an idea, this flash, this little birth. Inspiration. Inquiry is the word to use, right? It's boom, it's there. Right? And by the way, lots of different places in Chassidus want to know where does that come from, right? Because nothing in our lives is self-created, right? It all comes from God originally. So let's follow it up the chain until we get to God, right? And there is a chain up there, but that's definitely not the discussion today. So that's Chachma is the beginning of that seed. Okay, now, if somebody says to himself, so how does that play out in this scenario? You're already past Chachma. Or if you start thinking to yourself, what are the implications? What does this mean? If you're fleshing out the idea, anything beyond that first flash, you're already in the second stage called Bina. Literally understanding, or as he says, cognition. Right? So that first flash is not even really cognitive. That's a great way of describing it. It's just sometimes like it just, I don't know, there's just something there that you feel is a bad word. We're not in the emotions now, right? We're in the intellect. But there's something there, right? And then Bina is when I start to become cognizant of it. It starts to flesh itself out. It starts to have implications. It starts to make sense to me. Right? But this is all still in the mind. Das is what he calls recognition. Das is the one we're going to talk most about today. Das it's not just about implications. Das begins to connect it from the intellect to the emotion. Okay? And then from there on, we have the 7 emotions, which are the 7 children that can be born from this process, right? So, depending on what goes on in that first flash, and when that first flash gets fleshed out, and the way it gets connected to us, what happens during those 3 stages are what dictates what type of emotion we are going to feel. Okay? So we could call that process like education, right? It's educating our feelings, right? The term that the Tanya chooses to use is birth. Those 3 give birth to a child. It is actually very similar to physical birth, if you think about it. Chachma being the father, right, who provides that one seed. That's it, just the beginning. Bina being the mother who fleshes it out, right? That's what happens during 9 months of pregnancy. A seed gets fostered and developed into to be a whole proper idea, right? I mean, sorry, I keep jumping back and forth between the birth and the intellect, but you get the idea. And then out of that is born an emotion, chesed, kindness. I feel a love for this person. I feel a love for God, right? Or anything that falls under the category of kindness or of giving or of that, right? What we call the right side. Or depend, right? If there was other things going on if there were other topics going on in the intellect, then Gvura may be born, right? Gvura meaning restraint or strength. That may be born out of that intellect, right? Okay. Now, as a rule, everything that all of our 7 emotions fall under these 2 categories, either love or fear or awe, meaning the right side or the left side. And the middle is a combination of those 2. Meaning, so I spent some time earlier today, you might have noticed, talking about chesed, about gevura, and about das. We didn't speak about the following 3, or the one after that. Those 3 are really offshoots or derivatives of these 2 sides, right? So that's why it's so important to understand that there's the love and fear, or love and awe, right? The right side and the left side, positive, negative. There's a reason we have so many different words for these things, right? Because they have lots of different ways of translating, lots of different ways of being expressed throughout. But they all come down to the same point, which is they're either an offshoot of love or an offshoot of fear, again, depending on what was going on in the mind. Okay? Now, the Alter Rebbe pauses here to talk about the topic at hand. Right? So before, again, like I said, he's going to dwell on the third level of intellect, which is das, right? Or recognition. But before he does so, the Alter Rebbe pauses to talk about 3 verses that King David uses, with regards to God. And how this understanding of the way the process works is going to help us understand these 3 verses. Right? In one verse, all of them talk about King David, yearning for God. Right? I mean, this is actually repeated many times throughout Tehillim, Psalms, and all of David's literature. David all the time is yearning for God. Right? He's a human being. He's yearning for something higher. He's yearning for meaning in his life. He's yearning for godliness. 3 times he uses very similar phrases that seem cryptic in their differences, right? If you examine the differences, it seems like very nuanced and very okay, I guess he just chose a different word. One time he says, my soul yearns to be in the courtyard of God, bechatzros Elokeinu. Another time he says, my soul yearns for Elokim, tzama nafshi lelokim, lekelchoi. And the third time he says, my soul yearns for you, tzama lecha nafshi. My soul yearns or thirsts for you. Right? The Alter Rebbe explains that these are 3 different emotions that he was feeling. If you'd like to bear with me here, because I think this is something that's worth reading actually inside. I don't know that we'll have time today to read it inside, but this is on page 60. And the Alter Rebbe is explaining something that's first brought down in Medrash Rabbah, right? That there are 3 different levels of connecting with God. Now, why is the Alter Rebbe talking about these things? Because the answer to this question, why David uses why King David HaMelech uses these 3 different nuanced expressions, the answer to that lies in understanding that emotions are born from the intellect. What does that mean? The Alter Rebbe goes into great detail here. You can read it in the actual text. I encourage you to. That there's step 1. There's 3 different levels, right? Obviously, they're going to be in progressive order, right? How deep that love is, or that yearning for God is, right? Step 1, says the Alter Rebbe, is based on a meditation on the fact that the universe is filled with God. Step 2 is based on a meditation of the fact that the universe is engulfed by God. And step 3 is based on a meditation of the fact that everything in this world is utterly insignificant compared to God. Okay? Now those 3 seem very similar, but when we analyze them, we'll understand exactly why they give birth to different types of emotions. Right? On one level, a person can look around in this world and see, there must be a source. You look around, you see a tree that grows, and you're like, where does the power to grow come from? Right? This is Abraham style, right? Look up at the sun. Who created the sun? From this world, a person can see godliness within this world. Oh, the sun must be God. There must be godliness within this world. There must be some sort of force of creation, something higher within this world. Right now, this, while I'm not discounting this recognition of God, and it's very important that we do spend time like this, right? But it's a very low level. We're recognizing God only in His context within this world. Right? If we truly understand what God is, God way far supersedes the world, far surpasses the world. Right? God is infinite. This world is finite. Anything within this world and the whole world in its entirety is finite. It is limited. So then there can't be godliness. Right? Now, so does that mean it's not godliness? No, it is godliness, but it's a very low level of recognizing God within this world. And as a result, the yearning that is born out of that is that my soul yearns to be in the courtyard of God. Step 1, I wish to be in proximity to godliness. The second level is the universe is engulfed by God. What does that mean? There are times that a person can actually meditate a little bit deeper than that. You start off by saying, okay, so the tree must have godliness in it that empowers it. Right? But then you say to yourself, exactly what we just said to ourselves. God can't be the tree and the human being and the table and the chair and the stone. That can't be the all end, right? The end all of God. God has to be far greater than that. So in other words, even from the world itself, we can realize that there's a level of godliness that surpasses the world. Let me say that again. There's a level of godliness which fills the world. We see that in the world. We recognize that in the world. Right? But then even that recognition of God can show us or teach us or hint to us that there must be a level above that. There's, right? In Kabbalistic lexicon, this is called Mimale Kol Almin, or filling the entire world, and Sovev Kol Almin, or surrounding the entire world, engulfing the world. In other words, it's that godliness. Now, why do we call it engulfing the world? I thought we said this is a godliness that surpasses the world, right? So how could it even be related to the world? No, because it's the part of God, level of godliness that we see. I know we're getting very technical here, very Talmudic a little bit, but bear with me. We'll finish these three and then we'll summarize it, right? So the level of God that there is in this world, and then there's the level of God which is above this world, but the only way we understand it, it's still connected to the world, right? In Chassidus, we talk about Yediyat HaChiyuv and Yediyat HaShlila. I think there are proper scientific terms for this. There's when you know what something is, and then there's when you know what something is not. Right? There's the way of knowing what something is just by it's not this, it's not this, it's not this, it's not, I don't know what it is, I can't describe it to you, but it's not this, it's not that, it's not right now. That shlila, the fact that you're saying, or that negating, which I guess is the proper English word for it, negating the fact that God has anything to do with the world, even that is putting God in an equation with the world, right? Which brings us to the third, right? And that can only bring us a yearning for Elokim, which is the same numerical value as Hateva, or nature, right? So it's understanding God. Elokim is a name of God. However, it's a name of God the way He's encompassed in nature. The highest level is when we reach that level up, everything in this world is utterly insignificant compared to God. It's not that I see godliness within the world. It's not even that I see godliness as being even higher than creating the world. It's that everything means nothing to God. Like none of this is anything. Everything that we can ever wrap our brains around is nothing compared to God. And that's when King David finally reaches the highest level, which is my soul yearns for what? Not for Elohim, not for Kel, not for any particular, for you, whatever you are, whoever you are, God, right? That's what my soul yearns for the essence of God, which I can never wrap my brain around. That's what I yearn for. Mm-hmm. And these are three very, obviously progressively deeper levels of emotions that can fill ourselves from God, right? But what's the point, right? This was all an exercise, right? And that's the end of the exercise. But what is the point of the Alter Rebbe giving this exercise to us? Why is he going through this exercise with us? Because he's trying to prove this point that an emotion that we have within ourselves is born from an intellectual idea. Right? Here we see it clearly. There's different levels of intensity of a love or a yearning that David has for God based on different meditative intellectual ideas that he was meditating on. And so they're deeply connected. Now, what we've been avoiding this whole time is that jump. Right? That bridge. How does it jump? How does it jump from the emotion to be, from the intellect to become an emotion? How does that happen? This brings us to section 3, which is how to use your das. In the book, we're on page 62. Right? And let's start off, which is an exercise, not an exercise, which is a process that I expressly avoided doing, by talking about the word das. Right? What does das mean? Right? So, Irit, our local Israeli.
Knowledge.
What does the word dat mean? Dat means knowledge, to know something, right? On a very literal level, the word dat translates as knowledge. What do we mean by knowledge? So we said we had wisdom, understanding, knowledge. Right? What do we mean by knowledge? So for this we turn to a verse right in the beginning in Genesis. Actually in Bereshit, in the first parsha. It says, "V'ha'adam yada et Chava," that Adam knew Eve. Adam had a moment where he knew Eve. Right? Let's take a moment to understand. Okay, now, first of all, just on a very, 1 + 1 = 2 level, by Adam knew Eve, what the verse is implying, it says, "V'ha'adam yada et Chava," Adam knew Eve, and then Cain and Abel were born. In other words, it means they were physically intimate. They connected. They actually had an intimate moment where they became one for a moment. Right? Now, where do we see this in the concept of knowledge? right? What does it mean to know something, right? So we tend to use the word know very loosely many times, right? Oh, I knew that. I know you. I know him. I know. Right? But who do you really know? Right? Sometimes you say you know him, and then someone tells you, oh, did you know that he had a baby boy? No, I didn't. Oh, so you don't really know him. Well, I'm not that close with him, right? So you don't really know him. You may use the term knowing, but that's not really knowing him. True knowledge of something or of someone is that there's a connection between the two, right? You find something within that other human being that you feel a connection to, or that human being finds something within you that you feel a connection to, that he feels a connection to, he or she feels a connection to, right? And that's what true knowledge is. True knowledge is connecting two things. So in our case, true knowledge is truly knowing that concept, right? So we started with the first level was the flash, right? We spoke about that at length. Second level was cognition, we called it, right? So fleshing out that idea. It's still in our own brains, but applying it and implying it and realizing the implications of it, becoming cognizant of it. The third level is actually knowing it. Right? Now that we spoke a lot about the word knowing, we'll understand why he uses the word recognition, because it actually becomes a part of me, right? Just like Adam and Eve became one, they connected. There was that connection, right? Das provides that emotion finds a seat within you. It sinks into you. I'm sorry, that idea. I said emotion. Das provides that idea, that intellectual idea, which was so far removed, actually connects with you. Okay, let's use a few analogies to understand this. Let's start with children. Children are the typical example of not knowing something, right? Children all the time they're sitting in class, the teacher explains, I know it. How do you know it? Repeat it back to me. I can repeat it back to you, and the student repeats it back. 1 + 1 = 2. I know it. Do you know it? Does the child know it? The rules of the class. What are the rules? The rules of the class are you're not allowed to hit another child. You're not allowed to. You have to share with each other, etc. Right? Child can look back at you, repeat every single one of them, one at a time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are all the rules of the class. Does the child know them, internalize them? Does the child understand why you're not allowed to hit somebody else? You go and explain that to the child to be able to repeat that back to you as well. What's a sign that somebody knows it? When somebody actually begins to internalize it, right? So das is stability, or truly harnessing an idea. Another analogy is when right. So just back to the previous analogy. This happens by the way all the time with adults as well, right? Just because we're adults doesn't mean that we always actually know things. Doesn't mean we always actually internalize concepts, right? So sometimes you have somebody looks at you and says, he quotes somebody very wise who had a very deep saying that he said, right? And he quotes it. And could be he quoted it because he felt a connection with it, right? But he's quoting it. Then you can tell sometimes that somebody actually internalized the idea. They don't just tell it to you. You can question them about it. You can delve into it, and they've internalized. This has become a part of their life. As human beings, our best tool of measure and our best method of measuring these things, we like to say, do his actions reflect it, right? All the time we say, right? Oh yeah, does he practice what he preaches? Does he practice what he preaches? Right? Because that's our best way of realizing whether somebody actually internalized it, right? But truth is, you can even do that without internalizing it, right? A person can quote something and then act a certain way, right? So you can quote a very moral idea, even act that way, and he hasn't internalized it. Internalizing, another word for internalizing is maturity, right? Sometimes you see children, they're sharp, they're witty, they're wise. There's no maturity. They're not actually internalizing the idea. When someone internalizes an idea, then it's not just intellectual anymore, right? It's emotional. I'm going to reference back that story, and I'll repeat it really quickly, that we mentioned all at the beginning of Chassidus about how one should learn Chassidus, if you remember this. That there was that rabbi, there was the rabbi who used to do the farm hopping, right? And he was like the wise man of the city. And then once a letter came, and in the letter, it was written that the farmer's father died. And the farmer burst out crying, right? He started sobbing because of the loss of his father. But the rabbi or the wise man who was reading it didn't shed a tear. And then you analyze it from an intellectual level, and you analyze it from a very, logical, rational level, you say, I don't understand. Let's analyze this in terms of degrees. How many degrees removed from the letter are they? The rabbi who read the letter, if you remember this from the first class, he read the letter, he has the letter in front of him, he's reading, your father passed on to another world, right? Whatever the terminology was used. And yet he's not shedding a tear. Why? Because every word that he reads, he doesn't internalize. This doesn't hit him like a bombshell, as such a letter does to someone whose father actually passed away. The letter hits him as words, Does he understand it? Yes. Can he repeat it back to you? Yes. Does he fully acknowledge it? Has he fleshed it out? Does he realize the implications of what it would mean that somebody's father passed away? Yes. But it's not him. It's not him. He refuses to, exactly, there's no connection, there's no das. He refuses to internalize it. He refuses to make this him. As children all the time do, right? Or as we as adults sometimes do. We refuse to actually relate to the idea, sometimes because we're avoiding the hard work that comes with relating to an idea, to a moral concept, to whatever it is, right? In other words, das takes us, like we said, like we started off with, das says, don't just think about it. It's not just a flash. It's not just a fleshed out idea. It's not just intellectual. It's you. It connects to you.
It makes it real.
What?
It makes it
real. Exactly. Make it real. And then those three together, right? Abba, the father, which is Chachma. Ima, the mother, which is Bina, right? So those two, the first flash and the fleshing out of it, together, when they have that connection, that dot, they give birth to an emotion. That's where an emotion can finally take hold of a person. Right? Now let's talk about, trying to develop an emotion for God. Right? So let's go back to what the Alter Rebbe said when he introduced us to Tanya. He said, what am I looking to do? To give you the long but short way. The Alter Rebbe says, this is what you're going to have to do. If this is the way if this is the anatomy of our soul, right? That's what the title of section 1 is. If this is the way our soul works, in other words, there's three intellectual attributes and they give birth to emotions. So then we're going to have to start from the intellect and move down into the emotion. We're going to have to go through it in order to actually give birth to a real love of God. Not the, you know how great God is. Oh my gosh, God is great. Let me love God. Just as easy as it came to you, that's how easy it'll leave. If you want to actually have a proper love of God, you have to meditate about God. To quote unquote understand God. Right now, can we ever understand really God? No, but we can take a little kernel, we can take a little something and a little concept of God. Right? This is why one of the Hasidic, we're done the chapter. I'm a little bit talking about the implications of what the chapter does, right? The practice of the chapter. This is why Hasidim so often have the custom that they won't daven. Chabad Hasidim have this custom, and this, by the way, touches back on the Chabad, the concept that there's so much stress on the intellectual, the meditative state, that they don't daven. They'll never pray to God without studying at least a little bit of Hasidus beforehand. Right? And then that study has to reflect in at least a 10-second, a 5-second, a minute, an hour of meditation before davening. What Hasidim call fondly trachten Chassidus, or thinking Chassidus, right? In other words, you spend so much time, it's a philosophical book, it's such a philosophical book, we're discussing subtle levels and godliness and stuff like that, right? Take a moment to meditate about it, to let it sink in to what was the term you used? What was the phrase you used?
Connection.
To not connection, she said real, something real. To make it real. To make it real. Take a moment to take that meditation to thinking about God, right? And first of all, take a moment to actually think about God. Take a moment to learn about God. Right? To explore in your own mind and use your own mind to think about, and then let that harness itself through das, through that connection, and develop into an emotion. Now our love of God is not just a petty love of God, it's something we worked on. Right? And with every day that goes on, more that we learn, more that we develop, more that we meditate, more that we use our intellect to think about God, the more our emotions become real emotions and actually deep-seated emotions within ourselves. Whether that's a love of God, a fear of God, awe of God, right? We'll talk about this.
Also, when we pray, we shouldn't just utter the word. We should kind of meditate on every word.
That's the same concept.
Right.
So on a very simple level, by prayer, we have to actually think about what we're saying. Right? So many of us pray, either we know Hebrew, or even if we know English, and we say the same words every time, so we just say the same words. right? So that's a very simple level. Even just thinking, what does Elokei Abraham mean? It means the God of Abraham, right? But then there's, okay, today you learned, or a week ago you learned that Abraham reflects Chesed, or whatever, which I think is what you're referring to, right? There's more to it. What is God? What does it mean that God is the God of Abraham? And why does that have any relevance in my life? So you learned about it. Now take a moment to let that sink in, to let that actually affect your emotions, develop through das, through that knowledge, through that connection, to actually, like you said, make it real.